Hello. Good morning, and thank you for being here. About halfway through Ignite. How's everyone's week going? Good? Yeah? Not too high energy. Come on, wake up. Excellent. My name is Dan Rosnova. I'm a program manager in the Azure core team, working on messaging services, and have a few of my colleagues here in the audience I've seen. So today we're going to talk about Event Grid, a new service that I don't know when this showed up in the catalog for Ignite, but it was not released when we put out the papers for it. So I don't know when everyone got to sign up. Really, Event Grid is a new messaging platform in Azure and outside of Azure that's meant to bring events to the cloud in a similar way as they are already in operating systems and UIs. And so what this really means is that it's really kind of powering, although I didn't know it at first, a really big piece of the serverless world today. When we look at what's in Azure, for messaging services, we have a few. The big ones that my team's responsible for are Service Bus, which is sort of like a publish, subscribe, enterprise messaging platform, maybe like IBM MQ or TIBCO. Anyone ever work with those? Anyone know what Service Bus is? Show of hands. A couple of people, good. Okay, quite a few people. All right. And then Event Hubs. Event Hubs is a distributed data streaming platform. It's kind of like Kafka. It's a pretty good analogy, actually. Anyone using Event Hubs? Cool. Relay, this is our oldest service. This is the one you can tell who security people are because they freak out when you tell them about it. Who's using Relay? Anyone ever used Relay? A couple people. And then Event Grid. So why do we have all of these messaging services, right? Why don't we just have one that does everything? They're all purposely built to do specific messaging tasks without kind of making you try to jam everything into one model. So really, Event Grids is cross-cloud reactive programming. Like that's what we're trying to power, or reactive eventing. And what's that look like, and what's that really mean? Why is that a big deal now? When you look at modern computing today, modern computing today is all distributed. The cloud by its nature is distributed. We're really doing more distributed computing now than we ever have. And all of that compute, all of those services, all those things we use are really sort of islands right now. They're islands of functionality. They can be Twilio, they can be functions, they can be storage, they can be data stores, they can be all sorts of things, but they're really disconnected. And you're having to do more and more work to tie them together. And it's becoming a bigger and bigger task. And getting events from each of those services when something happens in a resource or when something happens somewhere is actually a fairly taxing operation. And we're to the point now where we're spending a lot of time on the glue and less stuff on what really matters to you, which is your application and what your application is trying to provide. So the idea for Grid is, what if all these events were in one place and could be managed and directed from one place, where rather than having to use webhooks to tie everything together, sort of spaghetti style, you can actually have a central place to do that. Anyone use webhooks for integration type stuff today? Is it fun? You like them? Yeah. It's a trick question, I guess. So Event Grid, what is it? It's fully managed event routing. We'll see what that looks like in Anger here in a little bit. It's near real-time event delivery at scale. We'll talk about scale numbers a tiny little bit. And it's really broad coverage within Azure and beyond, which we'll definitely do a demo of. There's some fun stuff to look at there. It's really the backbone of event-driven computing. Anyone do UI work in the past? Anyone familiar with delegates and C#? This sort of model like that? That eventing has been a solved problem within an application for a long time, even within an operating system, like going back to things like the Windows message pump, although that's a controversial topic to bring up with Microsoft people. So that's kind of a solved problem, but it's not been solved for the cloud as a whole, for when you get between cloud providers especially. So what are our benefits from Grid? What are we trying to provide here? We're really trying to provide something that is very low cost and pay per event, something where you're not paying if you're not using it, something that can help you build reliability into your applications, especially as you use more and more services across applications or across service providers, and something that will unlock new scenarios for the apps that you're building. Maybe a good example would be letting other people add extensibility into your apps without taking the responsibility of running their code. Who likes to let other people run unmanaged code in their own processes? Show of hands, yeah? No gamblers in the audience? Yeah. So the idea here is to manage all your events in one place. And what does that look like? It really comes down to having a series of event publishers and event handlers. So we think about things like storage or like Resource Manager in Azure, or event hubs, or even your own custom events, producing events on one hand, and then those events being delivered to appropriate event handlers on the other with some routing logic in between. Those event handlers could be things like functions, they could be logic apps, they could be Azure automation, depending what you're doing, and they can be generic webhooks that let you leave Azure, let you go to other cloud providers completely. When you see how these kind of all fit together, who's played with Event Grid yet? Anyone? A few people? In the first 4 weeks, I think we had 600 million events go through it, which is a very funny small number compared to the other services like Event Hubs, but it was a good start. So managing those events all in one place, this is like a very simplified view of what's that going to look like. How do you express intent in events that you're interested in? You can really just go into like an Azure portal and use the blade to look at something like your storage account and then look for what you're trying to respond to. So you get this idea of subscribing to topics, of routing those to the handler that you're interested in, and being able to do filtering on the way there. So the three areas that we actually, or I guess before I get to use areas, some of the things we're trying to provide here about performance are that we want sub-second end-to-end latency for all of your events. So from the time you created something in storage, from the time you put a user into a directory group or uploaded a document, we want to be able to give you a reliable notification in near real time. We want to be able to do this at a massive scale, at scale we need in Azure, at cloud scale. So 10 million events per region per second. So that's our scale target. And we want to be able to do it in a highly reliable way, in a way that's going to give you the sort of characteristics you're going to need to move past easy things in the serverless world and simple things or things you can afford to lose, and start putting items and workloads that you can't afford to lose into that same context. So things like, I don't know, if you use a lot of the sort of existing webhook stuff to integrate things, it's lossy. You might lose events. And there are some things you don't care about when you lose events, like where I stopped watching some TV show or what the latest cat photo is. But there's some things you really don't want to lose events for, like presence events, security events, moving money around. It's generally something you don't want to lose. And one of our other benefits we're pushing here is to have broad coverage. At launch, this is kind of what our coverage looked like. I'd mentioned that we had storage and the Resource Manager and Event Hubs on board. And then the subscribers that we already have in place are kind of what you would expect, the usual suspects out of Azure from a compute standpoint. And really kind of trying to play with the serverless space better by supporting things like logic apps and functions right out of the box with first-class integrations. We have other stuff that's on its way or coming soon. All of the services you would expect. Data Lake Store is lighting up very soon. Service Bus is lighting up soon, which should make any logic apps users in the audience, should make them fairly happy. So scenarios, where do we see this? This has been a long process. There's a few people in the room that have been involved in it pretty much since the beginning. And we've evolved our vision for this as we pushed it further and further to reality. Actually, the first scenario, serverless apps, is not. I mentioned something that I thought was a really big focus of mine in the beginning. But it turns out to be probably the place where we think this will have the most impact. Up until Grid, we did a good job of giving you the event handlers themselves. So functions provided and logic apps provided a serverless way that was easy to use and reliable to say, okay, I want these things to run in some context where I'm not managing servers, where it just works and it just happens. But without something like Grid to trigger these events, we were kind of in a very strange place where it'd be like a UI not having the on-mouse click, or on key press. Another place is ops automation. We actually think this is really big. We believe this is what most people do with Lambda today, is they're not actually writing applications. What they're really doing is sort of driving orchestration and cloud formation stuff. Amazon is a very different model of resource management than we do. Ours is a little bit closer aligned, I'd say, to Google's. And the way people are using serverless today is kind of, in this context, the most But we definitely see that being a big deal. It's why we actually delayed our launch to have Azure Resource Manager as a publisher before we launched the service. That way you can listen into all resource creation events inside your Azure subscription. And then the last one would be application integration. We definitely see this as a strong place for reasons you would expect. Something like a file is uploaded and you want to put it into an ERP. Integration between organizations, really kind of sort of bread and butter, sort of lodge gaps type work. So there are some concepts to keep in mind when you're getting started with Event Grid. The first is that the event is the first class object here. It's that the event is what happened. So what is it that you're interested in? What happened in the cloud that you're interested in, or in your app? The next is publishers. Publishers are where that event took place. So what happened? Where did it happen? Topics are where publishers publish their information to, where they send their information to. Most of the topics in Grid are going to be implicit. They're going to be there as part of Azure, so you won't deal with them too much unless you're using custom topics, but you will see the word in a second. We'll look at it, and you'll kind of know what that means then. Finally, event subscriptions are how you're expressing your intent to receive events. So this is how you subscribe and filter events. And the last piece is your handlers. These are your apps or services that are actually responding to those events and doing some work. There's some guiding principles that we use to build Event Grid. It's kind of a unique design that has come out really, really well. The first is that all events are independent, so there's no ordering between events. This is going to be very different from something like Service Bus, but this is the magic to scale, right? When we have this, when all events are independent, we can route them to different places. We can scale at a very, at a linear way. The other is that it should always be available, at least to write your events to. So you should never have to think about, well, is Grid going to be available or up? We've worked this into the very core of the platform, having availability at multiple levels. The next is near real time, which I talked about earlier, and at least once delivery. And the last ones are interesting too. They're dynamic scale. We want this to just be able to scale for us as well as for you without thinking about it. We want it to be completely platform agnostic. And that's why there actually isn't an SDK for using Grid. It's just webhooks. It is literally just HTTP post. And I'll tell people when they ask sometimes for an SDK, so the thing with Grid is you don't call it, it calls you. So you give me your SDK, I guess, and that's where we end up. And the last is that it's language agnostic. We really want this to be something that can work from any platform, any language, and we'll see a few of those today. Our target performance numbers, we didn't actually mean to publish, but they found their way out anyhow, and so now we can talk about them. That's that sub-second latency. That's at least 4 nines of availability. We think it can be a lot more for write. That's the scale and per region. The scale for how many subscriptions will we be able to handle. That's the number we're looking at to be about 100 million per region. We want our latency to be low even at large batches, and we want to have that exponential back-off retry. We have it today, but only for 2 hours. It'll be 24 before we ship for GA. And we also want regional transparent failover. So that's part of how we can make that promise of always available, is if, I guess we're not on the West Coast, so we could say this, if California falls into the ocean, your events should just keep flowing to somewhere else. So what does an event schema look like? Here's an example of a storage event. I don't know how well this shows up on the screen here. Pretty good, I think. You can see there are the things I talked about here. So there's a topic at the very top of this. That in this case, that's actually the ARM identity of a storage account. So that's where the event happened. There's a subject, which is saying the path to that file. You can see an event type here, which is a Microsoft storage blob created, and a time and an ID. The whole idea with our model is that once you get into, you're never going to see that pointer. Once you get into the data part of the message, that's going to be completely dependent on the publisher. So it's up to them to put whatever they want in this. You can see here that this has information that's interesting for storage. So I've got the path to the URL of the blob that was created. I've got a sequence number for it. I've got the type of blob that was created and the content length, things like that. So for other services, like for Event Hub's capture, you'll see something else here. You'll see the data field filled with stuff that's relevant to Event Hub's capture. So this is the kind of the way that you get to have one payload that shows up consistently in the envelope, meaning the top things, and then is flexible on the bottom stuff. And part of how this works so well, you'll see that the topic does have an ARM path here. What we've actually done for this was use a resource model that's an extension resource in Azure. Is everyone familiar with the Azure Resource Manager? Like how that all works? ARM templates, things like that, yeah? So this is actually one of the things that I thought was the coolest part of this, is that when you're interacting with Grid, rather than going to Grid and talking to Grid when you want to know about things like storage events, we actually are like a virtual extension to the storage resource provider. So you go to the storage resource that you're interested in and say what events you're interested in. Behind the scenes, the resource manager does a cute magic dance to actually talk to us about that. But the model gives you a nice consistent experience where you can have the experience of, if we look at this, of having the blue part on this be your storage resource and the green part be the extension. And you can see right where it turns green, if that shows up, that's where it shows a second provider past the storage provider, and that's the Event Grid provider, and it's hanging off of that. This is how you actually create, this is kind of ARM language for how you create a event subscription. You can see that the put is going to that full resource path, which I won't walk through, it's kind of verbose. And then the body is letting you say, what destination do you want? You want a webhook, you want it at this address, and you can do some filtering here. When I talked about our scale target on that 100 million subscriptions thing, the filtering is prefix filtering today. That's what's the fastest. That gives us a good lookup time. You know, it's big O of log of n, so we can have a lot of routes, a lot of subscriptions without killing ourselves. And then we do actually allow some ends with. So you can do an ends with. It's a separate operation after we do the first prefix matches. And then you can have a list of event types that you're interested in for this. When you actually see what a subscription itself looks like, I'll come back a little deeper into this. You can see here's a real one, actually. I copied this. The other one wouldn't have worked, actually. So this is included events here are blob created and blob deleted. That's what blob service gives us today. It actually has a prefix path on there, so anything that starts with this will pre-match. And it's doing a suffix, so it'll do the advanced match. Okay, let's see. Oh, I jumped past some stuff here. There we go. So real quick, before we jump into demos, which is coming up now, I want to talk a little bit about public preview pricing. This is a pay-per-operation service. You do get 100,000 free operations per month. So we intend for people to play with this at a smaller scale and use it without having to pay anything. Anything that you're doing in Grid, so whether that's creating a subscription, sending events in, doing advanced matches like ends with, or failure delivery attempts, so each time we retry, those are all operations. So that is kind of the unit you're paying for. So if you don't respond and we send the event again, that's a second operation. We do want to throttle management operations to some reasonable number that you don't try to use this as like a dynamic topology sort of thing. So that's at 10 per second. There's another big cloud provider across the lake from us who's very famous for this. And we do have a limit that you can call to lift if you really need, but you should really think about why you need, about having 1,000 subscriptions per account, per Azure account, so 1,000 event subscriptions. When you see what you can do with them, maybe you'll see that's a pretty generous limit, actually. So the first thing I want to do right now is show sending storage events to a webhook. What does this look like? Storage is kind of one of our big partners in this. This is a pretty important thing. And so how I'm going to show this is just having blobs, having Grid, and having a tool called request bin. I'll get my screen to stop freaking out here for a second. Anyone familiar with request bin? Anyone do like web development? Yeah. So this is a community-provided tool. It's free. It's just a site you go to, requestb.in. And here I'm going to create a request bin. All it's going to give me is a small URL. So I can use this to actually, you can see here it's got an example of doing curl. Our quick start for Grid actually uses bash, uses Cloud Shell and curl to do this pretty much. If I come back into a storage account, when I talked about Grid being an extension, I can see it under the settings for this specific storage account that there's a Grid section. And if I click on that, I can actually see what's listening to this storage account. And I can see stuff like the prefix and suffix filters and which events they're listening on. I can actually come here and create a new event subscription. I'll call it request bin. It's a webhook. I can decide which events to subscribe to and just do some. I'll do all just because it's easier. And then I have the endpoint that I can put in here. And so here I'll just put in request bin. I'm not going to play with any of the other features yet. And if I come here and click create, what's going to happen is back at my request bin, I never do live demos. Back at my request bin, I can actually see that a validation code was sent. This is kind of, this was actually a last minute sort of addition to the product. We at first weren't going to require this validation step until we realized that it would be very easy to use those 1,000 subscriptions and send one message and cause like a DDoS storm of like 1 million events going out. So we put this in as a way to stop that. Basically, the body that comes in the first time is going to have this code. You can see it's the same type of message. It's coming from my storage account and stuff, and from the grid provider. And it's a special message that's giving me a validation code. I need to echo this back with a 200 OK in order for the registration to actually work. We actually special cased request bin just so you could play with it and see what the validation code is, but nothing else is special cased. So if you want to see it and play with it, that's fine. But on your own apps, you'll actually have to echo back the validation code. So now I've got this created, and I've got some storage account linked up to it. You can see they're talking to each other. Now I'm just going to go upload a file. So if I come into this container 1 in the storage account, I can come here and browse and find a file. I will do a picture of Seamus and upload this. And what's going to happen here is that it uploaded, and then I come back here and refresh. Come back here and refresh. Wait, did I click OK? Yeah, I did. Don't all hit request bin at once. They don't have a lot of servers. OK, there we go. And what I can see is the actual, I can see my Seamus Beach Walk file was uploaded here. I can see the URL to the file that was created. I see that event that we looked at earlier, right? So this is something completely outside of Azure. This is something this could be another cloud provider or something else. And if I wanted to come back and use some of the other features that we were talking about a second ago, it's as easy as just changing my subscription. I can come into here, I can edit this subscription, or I can create a new one, or I can say I just want things that end in .jpg, and then hit save. And now if I go upload a file that is not a JPEG, I won't get that same event coming anymore because it's not actually matching the subscription. So if I go upload a JSON file, where would those be? Just take a temp JSON and upload this and hit upload. Now I actually don't get that event coming. I see that the last one here it did the validation dance again because I've done the update, but it's not going to get that file because I said just JPEGs. And if I come back and upload one more picture, again of Seamus, I think he's a good subject, then I will get this to fire, and I will get my storage event coming here, which I just about got. Let's see. And this gives me some capability of this is kind of where serverless becomes a little bit more interesting from being a new model where we're trying to figure out how to work with these kind of big pieces of logic to something that's a little bit easier to fit into context and ideas we understand. Is anyone familiar with the single responsibility principle in software development? Yes. So without something like a way to filter on events, you have to make functions that are too aware of the whole universe of things that they might encounter. So you can't really make a nice topology where you say, this is the function for delete, this is the function for create, and you end up having to put a bunch of logic in every one of your functions to know, well, what's safe for me to handle in which way. And so we kind of take that away. We allow you to sort of follow models that you'll be familiar with from other types of software development to actually build kind of modern applications. And if I come back now to our next thing I want to look at, let's see, what's that? let's see how this looks like with functions. This is a good one. So I have a function here that actually happens to already be wired up. I'll just show it to you really quick, and then we'll go through this whole thing from scratch. So here this function is listening. I am going to, you know what, this one may or may not listen, so I might have to create a new function. Let's do that. So I'm going to create a new function totally from scratch. I'm going to go, I don't know if they graduated this yet, out. No, I don't think so. So into experimental, and scroll down and find the event grid trigger C#. This resolution's fantastic. And I will just create this. I'll keep the default name. It's a wonderful name. And it did tell me, though, that I have to go into this integrate piece and create the subscription. So here, if I scroll down, it's going to show me an option to create. And I can say, OK, I want this function to react to things from Event Grid. And now I'm going to be able to pick what I want to listen to. I have the topic types come up. We kind of saw a better view of this blade earlier, which is letting me say, well, what things in Azure do I want to listen to? Do I want to listen to event hubs, to storage accounts, to Azure subscriptions, things like that? I'm going to go with storage account again. I'm going to pick a resource group that I know is in here, and then a storage account that I know is here. And again, I get the same things that I have for selecting the event types. You can see the subscriber endpoint is already pre-filled in. That's the functions endpoint for this. And then I'll just hit OK. And now when I get this deploying, I can come back to here and look at the console window for this. And if I go upload another picture, I'll just do another Seamus picture. Overwrite this. I'll actually see the function fire here. This is not the best window for this, but you can see that the blob got created. You can see that this came in here. It's just logging out what the raw event was. So I can start to put logic in here, and like I said, I can say, OK, just created events to this function, just deleted events to that function, and I can prefix and say just things under this container, or that end with .jpeg. So this is a way for you to start kind of wiring this stuff together. You'll notice that I didn't have to do an authentication dance. Like we made it, we worked with functions so that we do that behind the scenes. We know who they are and who their service is. We don't have to do the token exchange there. And we don't have to do that for logic apps either. And if I go and want to look at logic apps right now, I think that's actually the next thing I wanted to show, was, OK, storage is interesting, that's cool, but is this just reacting to storage stuff? No, it's really not, and that's not what the idea is here. If I go look at logic apps, let's go create a new logic app. I'm going to create a logic app that I want to listen to when anyone adds a user to my Azure subscription. So that's something you might be interested in if people, if you have a lot of people using your Azure subscriptions. It's certainly something I'm interested in before I get my bill. And if I come here and create a logic app and just go create, I'm going to create a new resource group for this, just do this completely from scratch, and I'm going to pick West Central US, because that's a place Grid is in. Grid will be global everywhere soon, but right now it's just in West 2 and West Central US. So this deployment's happening. This is spinning up all the resources I need here. I can actually come into this resource now. It's an empty workflow it mentioned. And the experience for designing this workflow is the Logic Apps Designer. I saw earlier a few people are using Logic Apps. And I can actually come right here in the beginning, and they show, hey, do you want to respond when an event grid event occurs? These are some of their connectors, their triggers for starting up Logic Apps. This is a pretty cool one to do because you get all of the same type of controls you got before for saying which events you want. If I scroll up, I'm going to have to sign in. Uh-oh, which screen is that going to be on? OK. And after I auth here, there we go. OK. And so now it's signed in here, and I can say I want to react when things happen in here. This will show me a drop-down when it's done loading of all of my Azure subscriptions that I have access to. I'm going to pick a work one. I can now pick resource types, like which grid events do I care about. I'm going to do Microsoft.resources.subscriptions. This is whole Azure subscriptions. You want to be a little careful when you do this one because if you're on a busy sub with like a lot of other people creating a lot of things, you're going to get a lot of traffic from this. You know, it's going to every VM create, every resource create, and Azure can match this if you don't put any filters in. Now I'm going to put a new step in here and say I want to have a condition, and that condition I want to do, so I'm going to cheat here and use something I know is in here. And that is that I want to see the trigger body, and I want to know that it's a specific thing that's happening here. So here I'm going to say if the trigger body is equal to this value, which is Microsoft authorization role assignments.write, that means whenever this is true, I want to do something. This operation name is a piece of the ARM data that I'm getting. And if true, I can come here and add an action. And the actions in LogCaps, they've got a ton of connectors. I'm just going to grab send email because it's easy. And I'm going to send myself an email that says that a user is being added to this account. It's going to ask me to log in again. This is a really fun way if you get someone else to make one of these for you to be able to send embarrassing emails to people because it'll keep their identity. So this email will look like it comes from me. I was very tempted. I don't know if Jeff Holland's here. I was very tempted to send some emails to Scott coming from his email address. But if I put myself in here and go and send some events here, new user added, and I can actually come into here and see subject. So you can see the designer's giving me some autocomplete options for the stuff from the step before that it knows about. And if I hit save here, save. The LogCap is actually in the background gone and created a subscription for this. So now I'm going to, cool. Now I'm actually going to go add a user to this subscription and watch this event fire. So if I come here to subscriptions, somewhere in here, there we go. And I go add myself, my other self, to this Azure subscription, I'm going to actually see that ARM is going to tell me, hey, look, someone added somebody to this subscription. If I go under IAM and go add, I'm going to pick a contributor role, so someone who actually has resource permissions to create stuff in Azure, this stuff that I might end up having to pay for. And now I'm going to look for a person to add here. It's checking who that is. It sees them. And now I save. And that user is added. And I'm going to get an email here very soon. I guess you'll see the pop-up when it happens, the toast, that this user has been added on here. And so it's only really when a user is added, not when they're deleted or anything. And I will get that alert here. I'm going to go back real quick to the LogCap so we can take a quick look at it. And now I'll actually get some more information about the LogCap itself. I can actually see that it fired at, this is the correct time. Let me check. Yep, that is the correct time. I can actually see that my, I got an automatic reply for myself. That's great. I can actually see the full body of what happened here. So this is the user was added to this account. And so now I can, if I wanted to send a Twitter alert or a Twilio or SMS or something, I can hook into that. Now I can use all the tools and toys and LogCaps to actually integrate with things like resource creation inside of Azure. So this is kind of another cool way that we're letting you get more control out of stuff than you might be able to get otherwise. Let's see, next demo, Event Hub's capture. This one's pretty cool. Is anyone familiar? I asked a few people who use Event Hubs, I guess. Is anyone familiar with the capture feature of Event Hubs? A couple people. We GA'd capture over the summer. The team that built Event Hubs worked a very long time to make sure that a very highly scalable, low latency telemetry stream platform was available for anyone to use. And then what we learned pretty quickly was a lot of people don't really know how to read and process a stream, especially at very low latency. So what they really wanted to do was get their data in files pushed to them rather than in a stream. As much as I've tried to change it in most of the last 10 years of my career, I've resigned myself to the fact that the world is still run largely through batch processes. My last paycheck or my death certificate will probably both be processed through some sort of batch system. I've given up the holy war. That's just the way the world is. So we actually added a feature to Grid, or to Event Hubs, I'm sorry, that's called Capture, to let you give us a storage account of your choice and a time and size window. We could say, instead of reading the stream and getting every event in pretty much real time, I just want to get files every 5 minutes or 10 megabytes. And I want them put in my storage or data lake account so I can process them how I want. So it's a really useful feature. And when we were looking at building Grid, and actually when we were building Grid, I actually kind of thought, and it's funny to say because I'm responsible for Event Hubs too, I actually kind of thought, you know what, we don't need to do Grid for Capture because people can just listen to the storage account and then know that there's a new file. But it actually turns out that it's really useful to get more context about that Capture file, to know that it's from Capture, to know what type of file it was and whether it's in Data Lake Store or Blob Store, to know how many events are in it and what's the oldest and newest event in it, so that you can decide when you're reacting to, okay, do I need big compute for this? Do I need little compute? How am I going to react to this? This demo is actually in our documentation already. It's under the how-tos. We'll probably move it to a conceptual walkthrough, or a tutorial walkthrough pretty soon. And the resources for this are all parts of that same walkthrough. You can see here, just like I had, let's exit that. And now, good question. Shouldn't the arrow be coming from storage? Yes. This is awesome. This is a great question. So let's walk through this real quick. So what we have here, I'm trying to see if you can see my pointer, is that Event Hubs is actually using Capture, and it's writing the Capture files. But actually, the alert actually comes from Event Hubs. So it's actually Event Hubs saying, I just wrote a Capture file. You could, you would get a different message if it came from storage. You could do this either way. You do get more context with it coming from Event Grid. But yes, you could do this either way. And when I first thought of it, I thought the exact same way. I thought, why wouldn't this just come from storage? So the question was, is the arrow on this not quite the correct arrow? So what we're going to do here in this application, I'm not going to walk through creating this one because it's kind of big. It's really all these pieces, and you can run through this in about 10 minutes. All of these steps happen. The Capture file gets created. The event goes to Event Grid. There's a function app listening, so a function that's going to do ETL with that file. It pulls the file and actually loads it into a SQL data warehouse. So this is pretty cool. The last step that we didn't get into this end-to-end is using Power BI to look at the data. But this is all the pieces. It's deployed through an ARM template, and then you can play with it yourself. If you want to go look at how, let's go look at how the Event Hub actually looks. I'll actually use a request bin to see what these requests look like too. I can come in here, and I can see it, just like storage had an Event Grid piece under its settings, so does Event Hubs. And I can actually see that there are things listening here on this. So I can see that there's this Capture event listening. And if I come to, let's come back to request bin and take this request bin URL. I actually just want to show you what these events really look like. I can come into here, say that I want to have request bin listen. Just put that bin in, hit create. And now about every minute or so, on average, I think that one's set to go a minute, so we might have to wait 30 seconds. You'll see a new event come in here. Well, first it's a registration event. But you'll see a new event come here in just a little bit, which will be an event about the Capture events that are happening. I'll keep clicking on this for a little bit, and we'll see if I'm lucky today or not. And it's an interesting event to look at. We'll look at it real quick just because it shows you how's this different from what you would see in storage. And wait for this thing to actually show me a new event. I'm looking at the time to know if it's actually gone through or not. Oh, it's not my lucky day. I'm going to have to go a whole minute on this.
Can capture do routing in the future?
Sorry?
Can capture do routing?
The question was, could capture do routing? So what's interesting about that is it's actually Event Grid is going to do the routing. So capture is just giving you a notification. Actually, here's the event, and we can look at it, and it's a little useful to see. You can see that this is a Event Hub's capture file created event, and I can see where the URL is for the file. I can see that there's nothing happens to be in this particular file. And so if I want this event in some different place, I can actually use Grid to do the routing. And this is just a shoulder tap to tell that piece of serverless stuff, hey, this has happened. There's a capture file for you to go process.
Yeah, I meant destination is what I was asking, actually. I was saying that I want to be able to write to multiple different places.
Okay, so the question is, can you use capture to write to multiple different places? Today, capture only, it makes you choose, and you can only do one. But you could use Grid to trigger off the copy operation that you want to do. That's a good question, though. Would you want them to be like data lake and blob, or just two different blobs, or something like that?
Because we might have different files that are coming from the factory. Some of them I want to store here. I don't want to have to go create a different event hub just to get the capture capability.
Yeah, fair enough. So the question was really about the paths for the files. You get to control the paths for the files, but they have to be the same for the whole event hub. So you can't say, like, this partition does that. And actually, if I look at this, I probably have a few events down here, because if I refresh this, because this actually tells you which partition that this was a part of. So this is partition ID 1. And I can, just because I know the pattern that I used when I built this, I can see this is partition 1. So you need all these pieces so we have identity for the file, and we don't have overlap, but you can put them together however you choose. Let's see any more fun pieces of this. I think that was the most interesting part to look at. The function's pretty cool, too. The function, like I mentioned, is just doing ETL into SQL. I don't know if people will really do this with functions, or if they'll use automation or other things to do this. But once this loads up, we can take a quick tour of the function. Let me check on time. Still got a little bit of time. I might jump ahead so we don't lose too much time here. This is actually using a DLL, so sorry about that. That's from the project. Let's see. Next one, Service Bus Event Grid demo. This one's pretty cool, too. There's been a lot of requests to have Service Bus be on Event Grid. And I guess the reason for this is it makes sense. Service Bus gives you long polling. It gives you transactional consistency. It gives you all this stuff like IBM MQ. And you're going to want to be able to use it. The issue is if you have certain like lower volume scenarios, polling a queue all day for something that's only going to happen a few times a day is kind of wasteful, and it really doesn't fit with the serverless model that well. Today in Logic Apps, for instance, you have to sit there and do a poll pretty much every 30 seconds, and you're paying for a Logic App execution every time, even though there's nothing happening. We actually have, and I can show this running in one of our internal clusters, that cluster is publishing message available events into Event Grid. We'll be turning this on in a couple weeks. And then you can have your Logic App actually wake up and respond to those events rather than having to long poll all the time. So the flow on this looks just like this. You've got Dynamics. I'm going to go create an opportunity in Dynamics CRM. That is actually going to send a message to Service Bus because Dynamics is already pretty well integrated with Service Bus. Grid is going to get that notification that there's now a new message in this queue. It won't be for every message. It's just for when there are new messages. Like if your state changed from there are no messages to there are some messages. And then a Logic App's going to wake up, listen to that, drain the queue, or at least do a batch pull to get like the first 100, and it's going to send some emails. If I look at what this looks like, I'll just jump right into the creating stuff part. If I come into Dynamics, and I go, okay, I want to create a new opportunity before my demo expires. And do new. And I'm just going to call I don't have to put much in here other than the name, I think, is the only thing that's required. I'm going to call this Dan's demo op. I'm going to go here and hit create on this. Or hit save. What's happening here behind the scenes is that a workflow is being fired when this goes live. We're going to look at the workflow real quick just through the designer here. Take a look at what it's doing. And then in a second, actually probably before I even get there, I'm going to get the email. Nope, that's not the right email. The email will come from Christian, though. Christian's here somewhere. I don't know where. He might be down at our booth. Christian's the PM for Service Bus. And so if I come back into my Logic Apps Designer, I can actually see here that this thing just fired. So if I refresh, I can see 8:30 something Pacific time event. And if I go look at what this looks like in the designer, this is actually pretty cool, because the idea here is not that you're going to get a message in Grid for every message that was created. And you can see this actually used the existing connector for Event Grid. This is using a custom topic today because we haven't deployed this to production yet. But once we do, it'll just be an Event Grid service bus topic, so the resource type will be Microsoft.ServiceBus instead. And then you can see that this step is actually doing a peak lock on a queue, and it's pulling the first 100 messages. And then it does a for each loop. So it does a loop on that and goes through every message in the queue that it pulled and then sends an email. So this is a good example of how you can, this is a really serverless application. It's not sitting there and polling all the time, which I don't know if I'd really call that serverless in spirit, at least. But it's reacting when it needs to. So it's waking up and reacting when it's important to. The last thing I want to show is something from my friends at a little company called PubNub. Anyone heard of PubNub before? A couple people? No? Okay. PubNub's kind of, someone, yes. PubNub is a messaging provider of their own, but they really focus on kind of the last mile of messaging. So between your mobile and the internet, or the browser and the first web server that you hit. And so they make these messaging features really for mesh sort of edge processing. And one of their latest things was that they have their own functions framework, which they jumped on the bandwagon and renamed it to functions because it used to be called blocks. And what that gives you is an ability to deploy this code that you write to their edge nodes around the world so that your browser or phone will just talk to the thing that's closest to it. It's not really meant to be a general purpose sort of compute and functions platform. It's meant to do lightweight processing like transformation, like key value store type lookups, and then to do them as close to the user as possible. So if I come here and actually go through, this is kind of the PubNub dashboard. You can sign up for their service for free without a credit card. It's pretty cool. I wanted to do that all, but I want to leave some time for Q&A. And if I come here and go to guide me to create a function, I can say my demo function. I can select what event type. I can do things like presence events, so like when someone's phone comes on the network or when someone logs into a website or something. And I can just do on request. I'm just going to do that. And then I'm going to put in a prefix for this. And when I go save and continue, it's actually going to give me a choice here of do I want a basic skeleton, what features do I want to put in here? I'll go basic, I guess, and hit save and continue. And now what this is going to do is actually give me a little IDE experience that I can use to see this function here. If I go now and use the magic of television to create something listening on this, I'm going to just paste in this JSON. We'll look at the JSON in a second so you can see what this actually does. And I'm just going to paste this JSON into there and give this a go. I'll replace what's there. I'll hit save. It's going to tell me that it's deploying this to their network. I need to restart my module. Their stuff's pretty cool. It's got some sophisticated traffic redirection stuff in it, so while I'm deploying, it actually deploys a second version of the function and drains the traffic off the old one and then starts using the new one. So it's pretty cool. And now I've got this here, and if I go back to my friendly storage account that I've been using for most of this, because I love storage, where are my storage friends? There you go. So if I come back into here now and go to Event Grid, I can actually add a new subscription for this really easily. And PubNub, this is what's really funny about this is we did not work with these people to do this. I do happen to know some of them, but I only tried this for the first time like last week. And I come into their UI, say copy URL. I copy that to the clipboard. I come back to our UI and say whatever name I want. Say webhook and paste in the exact thing from their URL. This is actually secure. They've got their own token in the query string here. So it's already, that's the key. That's the auth piece. And hit create. And if I come back into PubNub now, I'll see the first thing that's going to happen is that the auth event is going to get fired at me. And, oh, that's not good. That's right. I forgot to delete that. Here. It's this line. Doesn't like that. And the first thing that's going to happen is the auth event. This is actually kind of funny because this will retry. And let's restart this. And I can see this is good too. My deployment failed because I didn't auth back the code. So I have to add the subscription again. Wait and make sure this actually deployed. Clear. Sub. Add my webhook back in. And go and create. And now when I look back over here, this time that I've taken out the offending code, I can see that I got a registration event. I can see what that was. And I can actually see when the portal updates here, it'll say that it actually created. I can actually, it has created. It's just the portal needs to get the notification back. And I've got that PubNub subscription there. And now if I come back into this container and go and create another file, let's do I have anything that's not Seamus? No, more Seamus. Actually, I have a pretty good picture on there I could use. And now PubNub's actually going to know when I get these files, and it's going to get a second event will pop up here saying that, hey, I got a blob created or blob deleted. Upload. Oh, did I put a filter on this? Ah, nice. There we go. So I can actually see that that file has been created and gone through. What's really interesting from here is since we don't really have an API and it's just REST and it's just HTTP post, I can actually do two things from here that are fun. One is that I can use the PubNub network to actually start doing things inside of PubNub. I have a demo that kind of works here somewhere. That this is a PubNub chat application. It's just hosted in a browser. It's all JavaScript. And I can actually wire this up with a little bit more code so that it will start displaying those images in this chat application as I upload them. And then the last piece, and that's using PubNub's magic and PubNub's stuff, which is all WebSocket based, and there's no long pulling. It's no pull. It's just push. And I can actually build pretty good reactive applications now here that span cloud providers, that span different technology stacks, and that work well together and kind of help me build more expressive applications. The last piece, kind of closing the last mile here, that's pretty interesting is since it's just HTTP request response, this is what a node to actually send to Grid looks like. So this, I'm just using the request module, and I'm including a UUID one because it's easier. Here I'm creating my own event. I'm putting it in an envelope for my own topic, and I just call send on that topic with the key, and it actually just sends the data to me. So if I wanted to do that, I can actually do it from PubNub, and I can do it from their client, so that just JavaScript, so that the data is able to flow in two directions now. So not only can Azure tell other cloud providers about what's happening, but those cloud providers can tell Azure back or your other resources in Azure about what they're doing. So creating your own topics is really simple. I'm going to come into here and just do plus new in the portal. Go to Event Grid topic. Hit create. I don't know how many of these I've created, so I'm just going to pick some number. I'll use a new resource group for this just because I can. Choose what region I want to make this in. I'll do West 2, hit Create, and this is going to deploy fairly quickly. And now I'll have my topic that I can actually use and go send messages to. And when I get there, come on, come on, come on, come on. Let's see if this finishes. I can see my topic is here, and if I click into that topic, I can actually see the URL for the topic. I can see the keys for the topic. I can regenerate the keys. Grid supports just sending the key in a payload in an HTTP header, which is not a good idea, or sending a token made from the key, a SAS token, just like Service Bus and Storage and Event Hubs use, so that you can do either. And then the other piece that you'll see is that I can actually go add my own subscriptions to this. So we saw creating subscriptions for Azure topics, and this is a custom topic, so I can put whatever I want here. You'll notice that there's no event types here. It's because it's a custom topic. That's something we haven't built yet for custom topics, but we want to, so you can register what type of events and schemas that your topics support, so your users can get a better view of what type of data is there. So this is pretty cool, and I actually do want to take a couple questions, so I probably won't go too much further and give you a couple minutes back before lunch. But yeah, so this really will help you kind of make serverless real. The places that we see, let me go back to my presentation. The places that we see this being very popular actually tend to be when you're trying to build loosely coupled systems, when you're really trying to build loosely coupled stuff. An eventing model that lets you react rather than polling comes out pretty easy. Again, it's about us trying to give you the right tool for the right task. There are a lot of things you're going to want to do in messaging, and we're trying to change our past where we shoved everything under something called Service Bus, and it was the greatest messaging tool in the planet, to saying, hey, when you want to do this, go for this tool. When you want to do that, go for that tool. It's not like a Swiss Army knife that's going to try and do everything and do it all kind of half-baked. We want to say the eventing platform is for eventing, the telemetry platform is for telemetry, and we want to let you know when is which. The big question that comes up a lot, and I'll just preempt it because someone's probably going to ask it, is knowing the difference between events and telemetry streams. So what's an event and what is just a piece of logged data? If you twist your mind model enough, you might be able to say that they're kind of the same thing. I know Clemens on our team, Clemens Vasters. Who knows Clemens? Yeah, that's it. That guy personally knows like everyone I've ever met in my life. I will be somewhere in like Asia and say his name and say, oh yeah, I know Clemens. And they like personally know him. So what we want to let you think about is, he likes to say this, although I'm not totally sold on it, so I'm looking for feedback, is that events are things that are independent and actionable. And so they're not like a login log or entry or something is not necessarily an event. It might be, but it might not be. Whereas telemetry is kind of going to be everything. Like you could pay us 20 times what Event Hubs costs and send everything through Event Grid, but if you're trying to do things like stream processing, it's not really going to work really well. So you'll have things like mouse click, that's an event. Things like presence or walking into a room, that's an event. And then you'll have things that are further downstream, like stream processors that are looking at your telemetry stream of data and maybe firing alarms, which are events of their own. So I kind of think of eventing as concentric circles of what are edge events, what are core, what are sort of device events, edge events, and core events. And as you're getting closer to the core, that's really towards like a specific set of compute in Azure, things in a cloud provider, and kind of tying these together. Please feel free to play with Event Grid. It's a fun service. It's very easy to get started. Anyone knows how to use curl, you can use that to go. So the bar for entry should be fairly low. I will be happy to take any questions, but I will ask that if you ask them, please come up to the microphones so that other people can hear your questions. And they don't have to be on Event Grid. They can be on any of our other messaging services.
Hey, Dan, I'll start with a question. So I'm trying to still kind of get a grasp on the type of data I should be sending to Event Grid. I know we're talking about events. So I come from supply chain, and we have all kinds of events, shipping events, manufacturing events. And it's not really transactional, but it's an important information. So can I send my shipping information events to Event Grid and treat it like it's going to definitely get there? I mean, you guys guarantee it's going to get there. There's been a confusion in our team about what type of data we can send to Event Grid.
So that's a great question, and actually supply chain is an interesting area because some things I would say are so important you don't want them in events, and that's like the actual changing of hands of money and merchandise, like placing an order is something that I wouldn't necessarily make an event, even though it can be an event, but I would make that something like a message in service bus because you're getting transactional consistency, you're getting dead lettering, you're getting all this other stuff. But things like ship notification is a perfect example because people want to know about those, and you might not know who all the people who want to know about them are. So you're giving people a way without talking to you, but still going through security to latch on and say, okay, yeah, I can subscribe to these types of events. So absolutely, I would do things like ship notifications as events. Things like orders, I would really kind of do through some sort of enterprise messaging platform.
So you guys are going to support IoT, so I'm just shifting a bit. You guys are going to support IoT soon. And everything in IoT, when we think about devices, all the messaging, I can send an event and it's considered telemetry in their type of language. So then there's a gray line there, and I'm trying to assess, okay, when I want to say that, oh, I failed to install some package, to me that's an event, but they consider it as telemetry.
Yeah, what we're doing for IoT, the events that'll be there at first are really going to be like device lifecycle events, like device registered, device deleted, things like that, and we'll build on that as we go. IoT does have today a very good mechanism for getting telemetry, and like I say about the concentric rings, that's kind of the whole stream of telemetry. So the devices themselves in the future might raise occasional events, and then you might get something like IoT Hub or a stream processor reading your IoT Hub, raising other types of events. Like
tool for the job.
Yeah, look for this type of pattern in the telemetry stream and raise an event to let me know that it's happened.
Okay. Anybody else have questions? I've got more questions, but I want to open it up to other people.
Sure. Maybe go ahead.
Okay, I'm just going to go back to the capture. Again, I asked you about this, but I don't know if I really got a specific answer.
Yeah.
I don't want to have to create a new event hub for every single folder that I want to create. So I want to go back to that routing that you guys have created for Grid, which I love, because then I can really just use one instance of that. Mm-hmm. I want to have one event hub that I can then do some routing to say that, hey, if you start with this, write to this folder. If you start with another, prefix or postfix, go right to this other folder. Are you guys thinking, or can you add that support?
We probably could. If we look, I'll show you real quick what the UI for Grid looks like, for Capture looks like. Because it's a very simple UI doing a very simple thing, and I love simplicity, so I'm a little remiss to change that. Yeah. But if I come back to here and look at this specific event hub which has Capture on, the Capture feature is underneath not under Grid, underneath the actual event hub itself. And
properties.
These things are small. There we go. Under Event Hubs, and then under Properties on that Event Hub. And so in this Event Hub, I can actually see, like, what's here is just the simple pieces. Like, what's the name, what's the format of that name, and which storage account does it go in. I don't really get the ability to do any advanced filtering or pre-data here. Plus, the capture events are completely raw and unedited, like they're exactly how they were in the Event Hub.
But so I want to save money, right? I don't want to have to go create another Event Hub just to write to another folder. Will I get charged more if I create another Event Hub and then create another capture?
So what's interesting about Capture is Capture is actually charged at throughput unit level. So you can have 10 Event Hubs and you're paying for one throughput unit and one capture hour, but we don't care if it's one Event Hub or 10 Event Hubs.
Okay.
Yeah, great question. But that limits you to 1 megabyte per second, so throughput unit cost.
Are you guys going to support JSON or CSV?
Ooh, for Capture.
I've already asked you this. I never got an answer on this.
Yeah, for Capture or for Grid?
Capture.
For capture.
I know you have Avro files right now.
Yeah,
but
tough,
you know,
the
JSON and CSV are very...
The tough thing for both of those is, and we chose Avro for a very specific reason, is that it lets us have a binary payload that won't break anything. The problem with saying JSON is if you put malformed JSON in there, like what happens? It's no longer a valid JSON file.
But if it's text, then you don't have to validate, am I right?
Well, that's not true, because we'll have to escape stuff. So like CSV is a perfect example. People can put their own commas or their own delimiters in CSV. We would have to base 64 encode the CSV, and I would have a special place in hell if I did that, because people would hate me. There'd be people hating me forever.
Okay.
And now you know what I look like. You'd be sitting there 2 years from now and be like, oh, that guy.
So last question, the custom payload. Can I have a 0.5 megabyte?
Ooh, for Grid.
Yes.
Yeah, right now we're limited to 64K on Grid. We can be flexible. We want to draw the line there. Once you're getting to 0.5 meg, you're really getting to something that's probably a good fit for blob storage. And then you can just subscribe to the blob storage to get the events you want.
Fair enough.
Yeah, we have a good storage service. We don't need to build another.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you very much.
I got a question.
Yes?
In one of your examples where you had the dynamics, the service bus, and the event grid going to logic apps,
Yeah.
we could have also done that without the logic apps, I mean without the event grid. However, the scenario was more for avoiding polling. Am I right?
Yeah, so you can do it without Grid at all, but you will be pulling the queue all the time.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, so it's really an optimization. The Logic Apps team is working with us on how do we make this a nicer experience. But the idea here is just a shoulder tap to wake up and know this queue has data.
Okay. So is it then fair to say that where you have least amount of the rate at which the data that's coming in is low or unpredictable, that you want to be working up when even it comes, is you want to go for event grid. Whereas if you have consistent and huge amounts of data that you can predict that's going to come through, you want to go service bus? Is that a good?
Oh no, I would say both of these went service bus for a reason. One is that Dynamics already is integrated with service bus.
Right.
We are trying to get Dynamics integrated with Grid. But today in Dynamics you can actually transition a whole
No, even if
order.
it's not Dynamics, like say any other thing that I'm using the service bus for, I'm just trying to understand where I would not use event grid or where I would not use service bus.
Yes, so I was dancing around this a little bit earlier. A service bus is really things like business state transition. So like your CRM is sending an order to your ERP. So you're really kind of handing off, hey, this is money and material moving hands. That's definitely something we encourage people to use service bus for, especially because you get things like dead letter, like TTL,
Right.
like all this. I mean, if you, I trust Event Grid a lot, but I wouldn't want to transfer my 401k with it. You know, like whereas MQ or TIBCO or service bus, it's made to do that.
Okay.
Whereas things like just notifications, like hey, there was an opportunity entered, rather than this opportunity is closed.
Okay.
That's where I'd kind of draw the line.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Great question. All right, and if there's nothing else, oh yes, sorry.
I'm not sure with things being so new that there's a pattern yet. This came up in one of our webinars. When we have significant things that we'd like to route base, you guys asked before about routing, whatever. So there's starts with, and then understanding that some of the other things like ends with or contains or whatever will be at least a separate unit of evaluation.
Yeah.
We've been looking at stream analytics, we've been looking at functions. Among you and the other serverless people, have you kind of decided maybe where the sweet spot is where you have to do either significant subject evaluation or even data package evaluation, where the sweet spot is to do that? Because some of this stuff is great for the simple starts with, but when you have to do something a little bit more advanced than that, does it feel like there'll be some expanding of what the subject kind of parsing is, or do you think that's some other tool, like a function that you'd offload that to?
That's a great question. That's probably for another tool. We don't want to break our scale, so while we could potentially do things like regexes on the subject, we never want to break the body. Like we never want to crack into the body because that's someone else's
So that
world.
makes sense.
Yeah. What we can put into that subject filter, I mean, it's kind of limited into how big that is.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, I would try and choose the right tool, like feed your stream processor with one subscription and do the more heavy lifting in that. one thing I actually totally forgot to bring up today, and Cesar's probably going to be angry with me for it, is that we're turning on, like literally in the next few days, having event hubs as a subscriber destination for Event Grid.
Okay.
So you could say, I want my Event Grid subscriptions to dump the data into this event hub, and that will light up things like using Stream Analytics. Stream Analytics, people have asked, well, can you just send to Stream Analytics? But it's a stream processor, so it needs to be able to reprocess queries and stuff, and that's not how Grid works. So by landing the data into an event hub, you get sort of the characteristics you expect from an event hub, and the replay is the big thing that stream processors need to be able to reproduce the same output.
Cool.
So when that turns on sometime this week, I don't know when, this week or next, I don't know exactly which day, you'll actually get a much better tool to do that.
And then as far as the subject processing, do you believe the actions that are currently available versus GA, is it a solid list, or do you think there's still a few that are going to pop out?
We're looking for feedback there. If people want regex or want something else, we want to know what people really need.
Okay.
We want to be careful about not exploding our compute in that
And
area.
that's the thing, we don't want to jeopardize the platform. I think hopefully
Yeah.
you guys are doing the investigation, like we can't do this at scale, and then we won't allow it, so.
Yeah,
Okay, cool, thank you.
thank you. Oh, one more.
I guess, does, the event grid at all will be able to interact with service fabric actors? Let's say I have some events coming and I want to, monitor some edge devices and then update my actors based on what's happening.
Yeah, I think you could do that today, actually. I think you could have the actors Service Fabric exposing an HTTP endpoint that you're feeding into the actors. And so all of your, I don't know which level of filtering you'd want to do where. Maybe you want to do some filtering in Grid, but you certainly want to feed those actors through the Service Fabric endpoint and then be able to sort of do more advanced type filtering there. Like if your subject has IDs in it, you'll be able to feed the actor for that ID.
Okay, that's what I was thinking. The most common sense would be to start with, but I was curious if there is any way you were considering to kind of in a portal easy way to,
That's a good question.
connect it up, because that's what we do now, essentially.
Yeah. That's a good question. We'll have to think about that, actually. I'll meet up with the Service Fabric team next week. Thank you very much.
I had one last question, sorry.
Yes.
So I was thinking in terms of designing a big data streaming pipeline, and something you said towards the end changed my understanding of Event Grid. So Event Grid is something that would not be applicable for something like that, because I guess Event Grid doesn't support queuing up events, and if you want to replay events, then that wouldn't work. Is that what you would say is the biggest difference between how I think about event grids versus event hubs?
So Event Grid will queue up events, and it does queue up events, but it doesn't give you control over that. And it's not consistent ordering. Like there's no order, there's things like that. You can use Grid to feed an event hub, but if you're doing stream processing, we actually just got event hubs finally moved out of IoT, and it's now marketed as big data, because that's what it is. It's Kafka as a service, basically. And it's, when you want to do stream processing, you want the buffer, you want the replay, you want all the stuff that Kafka is giving you, and we give that to you as a pure PaaS today with event hubs.
Okay. As opposed to that, if I was designing a data pipeline for batch processing, Event Grid is something that could be used.
If you're doing any big data stuff, I would use it. I would really focus more on event hubs than Event Grid. Like it's really the use case for it. For the batch processing stuff, we've put capture in there is strikingly similar to Amazon's Kinesis Firehose. So like if you're looking at Kinesis, that would be Kinesis Streams would be event hubs, Kinesis Firehose would be capture. And Kafka doesn't have a concept yet of give me batches of data, it's still just the raw stream.
Okay. One last question is, when you were talking about subscribing to Azure Functions, you mentioned that Azure Functions builds in the capability of doing the auth handshake.
Yes.
So all you need to do is give it the endpoint. So does that mean that the endpoint has some sort of secret key embedded in it? Because otherwise I could just create subscriptions for any Azure Functions and flood them with messages.
Yeah, so Functions already has like a API key concept, and you have some control over what you want those keys to be like, and you can make multiple keys. So the URL for the function has its own key in it, and the function's platform, like the HTTP controller in it, understands our auth request and also knows our certs, so it can tell that that auth request is really coming from us and not from somewhere else.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool.
Thanks.
Great questions. Thank you very much.